Red, blue, and white, there's not a doubt. We play the game to win. A team that knows commitment, that's the way it's always been. We rise up to the challenge, we give the game our all. With sheer determination, we go in for the ball. With the crowd thunders, go Cats, we break the banner down. We know they'll play with...
Hi everybody, welcome to the Big Footy Cats podcast. We're up to episode 9 of, well, what is now the end of season 2016. We've got a good show lined up, I hope, tonight to discuss a few recent events and the trade period. So first things first, we've got Pivo joining us again. Welcome, Piv.
Willow, how you going?
Very well, thanks, mate. And we've got a very special guest lined up for tonight in order to try and bring a bit of credibility to the show. We've got the from the Geelong Advertiser and formerly a Big Footy, pretty sure mod on the Geelong board. We've got Ryan Reynolds. G'day, mate.
G'day, fellas. How are we? Yes, former mod. Don't know about this credibility. You might have got the wrong number there if you were trying to talk to someone credible, but we'll see how we go.
Thank you for being willing to get involved. Very much appreciated.
No worries. Love the Catters.
And we might be hearing from you a fair bit because you were silly enough to tell me that you'll step in if I'm ever short, and most weeks whenever we do it, I'm chasing people up. So you might become our regular.
Oh, could be. I could have my own little section.
Yeah, there you go.
Any time for you, Willow.
So what we're going to do...
I was actually thinking that since you used to go by Rizzo. I mean, Willow, Rizzo, and Pivo almost sounds like a show on Fox or something.
a bad
got a ring to
it. Something on Triple M, maybe.
Yeah. I thought we'd start with is, while we've got you on, Ryan, is to obviously being a very passionate Cats fan to the point that you were a mod on Big Footy, now being a journalist at the Geelong Addy, which also is a news limited paper, and so your stories would go everywhere. How do you find the balance? How do you separate the two roles?
Yeah, it's funny, like, when I first sort of thought about, being a journo and obviously being a Cats fan, working at the Addy as a footy writer, sort of one of the ultimate sort of things, you kind of think it might be hard to sort of lose that sort of fan, like perspective, or, just be like that really ultra Geelong person. But it's sort of, after a couple of years, you sort of get used to it a little bit, and it's a bit weird, like, as a supporter, I guess you guys would, I'm assuming you guys would think the same way. It's every week it's a massive build-up, and then, if Geelong win, you're bouncing till Friday, and you can't wait for the weekend. And if Geelong loses, it ruins your whole week, and you're so down in the dumps. And I guess, when you're a journalist, the minute the siren sort of sounds, whether Geelong wins or loses, or, they play good or bad, you sort of write up that game, and then your attention turns to next week, just as quickly as 20 minutes after the game, when you're sort of talking to the players in the rooms, you're picking their brain about, what just happened, but you're also sort of quizzing them about next week. And I guess, you probably just don't have that time to sit on it and stew on it as much, which probably makes it a little bit easier in terms of being a fan and having to cover matches.
Do you find yourself, is it hard not to barrack, or do you still just barrack anyway? Or if you're in the press box or wherever you're watching from, is it hard do you have to like remain professional, or do you and other journos like openly barrack for their teams?
Well, up in the press box, you obviously get a lot of the club media people in there, and sometimes they can get a bit up and about, so you can sort of feed off their energy a little bit. The journos tend not to barrack, but I'd be lying if I said I haven't had the old subtle fist pump or a slam of the desk, depending on if it's good or bad. Like, as one example, when Tomahawk kicked that goal after the siren to beat the Hawks, I think I got 3 foot up in the air and had to remember where I was. It was a bit hard to control the old celebrations there, but most weeks it's not too bad.
And then, how do you go Then, as you mentioned just before, like if you're down in the rooms and interviewing players and everything, when you first started doing it, was there still just like the bit of the mad supporter fanboy that you couldn't believe you were getting to do this, or is it that still exists to a bit, or are you just used to it now and you know the players and it's a different sort of mentality?
I must admit, when I first started, and I reckon it's the same for most, sort of sports journos who start, you're definitely a massive fanboy to start with. I mean, you go up and try and interview, say, Jimmy Bartel or a Corey Enright or Joel Selwood, and it's intimidating, I reckon, to start with. Like, you're sitting there and wondering, what do they think of my questions? Am I asking something stupid? Like, do they think I'm interviewing them all right? You've seen them for 10 years on TV, and, you love everything they do, and you just sort of, especially early on, you sort of want them to sort of think that you know what you're talking about. But I guess probably now I've been doing it 6 years, it changes a little bit more. I think, you get to know the guys more so than just, Jimmy Bartel, a footballer. You sort of know him more than, sort of off the field, and you sort of see him around the club a bit more. So I guess like that sort of fan perspective wears off. Sort of the longer that you do it, and the more you deal with them, like we'll be talking to players 3, 4, 5 times a year. So it sort of loses that effect, after a year or so in the job, I reckon.
Yep.
Do you have a favourite? Can you say that? I don't know.
I tell you what, I love Patrick Dangerfield. I've got the biggest man crush on Patrick Dangerfield, and it's not just because he's a good footballer. He's just a fantastic person to sort of have a chat to after the game. And I wrote in my piece after he won the Brownlow, like, Geelong loses, Geelong wins. He drags up his esky, or he'll sit on the ground because he's that exhausted, and he'll give you 15, 20 minutes if you want it. Sometimes it's hard for some of the players after a loss or whatever. They sort of do it because they're told, and they're friendly and they're nice, and they give you some good answers. But Paddy's just one of those really genuine guys, and he doesn't even if I think if he wants to brush you off, he doesn't brush you off at all, and he's really respectful through the whole thing. So often on the field, Danger's just an amazing footballer, and I reckon he seems like a pretty good bloke too.
He's been a fairly handy acquisition, it's fair to say, for the club.
He might have made a little bit of an improvement to our midfield this year, I reckon. That's something else he is.
Now, it's a good. That's a good talking about acquisition. It's a good segue to go on to our next topic. Is the recent? Well, in the last 24 hours, I think it was about. Well, it's 24 hours. It was about 6 o'clock, 5:30, 6 o'clock yesterday evening. I think that from what my reading of Twitter, that Sam McClure broke the story that that Gary Ablett Jr. had requested a trade back to Geelong during trade period. And then I believe the Addy was, I'm pretty sure I heard it was front and back page today. I didn't see the paper today, but you guys are obviously all over it.
Yeah, absolutely. Gaz is still a big name down here, isn't he? And I think probably a lot of Geelong supporters would be pretty keen to see him back in the blue and white hoops one day. It'd be an amazing story to see him sort of come back and finish his career at the Cats, considering sort of the history and all that sort of stuff. And I reckon the Addy might be doing some sort of campaign to sort of see if we can get him down there at the end of the season anyway, hopefully. We had Come Home Paddy, it might be something similar, I reckon.
We'll get back to the Addy on that in a moment. Pivo, what were your thoughts, I suppose, with hearing that news, or at least, there's been whispers, if you're looking on internet forums and social media and things like that, there'd been whispers for a few months that there was the potential of him wanting to come home, but to have it pretty much confirmed, and then obviously to confirm that the Gold Coast just shut it down instantly. What was your initial thoughts, Pivo?
Okay, so I must admit I guess I was aware of it, but I hadn't really paid it too much attention. Just knowing that he recently, he signed the contract extension. I think he's 1 year into the 3-year deal. I think it is, and So yeah, I guess I had sort of seen it sort of on the board and stuff like that, but hadn't really given it too much thought, other than does he idolise LeBron James and is dying to sort of come back and do a similar to what James did with Cleveland or something. But yeah, obviously it was pretty interesting then when it then did break that he had actually requested it, and how Gold Coast obviously shut it down fairly quickly. And then sort of, I guess today I had a quick look through the thread, and there was a few comments left, right, and centre in terms of the AFL wouldn't allow it to happen and things like that, which always I guess makes me chuckle a little bit. But then again, look, I didn't think it was something that was on the cards, and then it came out that it was on the cards, and so maybe there is a bit more to the whole AFL sort of roadblocking it a little bit as well. So yeah, it was interesting. How much good he would do probably is open to debate as well, considering his age and the way the injuries have been. But yeah, look, it was a good story at the end of trade week, I suppose.
And then I suppose a follow up for either of you two is, would you expect there to be a play made for it again at the end of the next season? And then would it be too late? Like, my sort of theory is if it was going to be done, it sort of had to be this year. And I'd worry too much going forward about the cost and his age and then potential injuries. Depending on how he goes this year, I sort of thought if it doesn't happen this year, I'm not... Apart from the romantic side that would love to see him back, I don't know if it would be the best thing for the Cats to have him back. So I don't know what either of you two, what your takes are on that situation. I'll start with you.
I reckon I was a bit surprised a little bit that the Gold Coast shut it down so quickly. Like, you got to look at their list, and they lost Prestia and O'Meara. They're not going to be contending for the most part for a fair while, I would have thought. Gaz is obviously on some pretty serious money up there. Just makes you wonder whether they could have freed up that salary cap room and shipped Gaz back to Geelong and sort of been able to sort of start their rebuild again, or try and build their list back up again. But I think the thing with Gaz is, and I hope the Cats do come back in for him this year, is I reckon he's still got a little bit to offer, even if it is just a forward. I know he's getting on in age, and he's obviously had some serious shoulder injuries, but I think the positive, if you're looking at it from a Cats perspective, is that Gaz's injuries have tended not to be so much through age, or they're not those sort of soft tissue injuries. They're a shoulder injury you can hopefully get through. It's not something that you're likely to be sort of reoccurring as much as, say, like a hamstring or a calf when you're in your 30s. So I reckon he'd definitely have a role to play at Geelong. It's just a matter of whether they can fit him in the salary cap, and if he's willing to probably take a pretty hefty pay cut to return home.
Yeah, Pivo?
Yeah. The romanticism of it happening, I think is, I guess everyone would love to see it. I mean, it's such a famous name to do with Geelong, and on that alone, you sort of think him coming back would, bring all the membership sort of benefits and people on seats and things like that. I probably have a little bit different take on it, in that just his age and the fact that he's sort of missed a bit of footy in the last few years does sort of concern me a little bit. And then there's maybe a wider, I guess a wider concern in terms of how we've sort of moved on, the Chapmans and Johnsons and Bartels in recent times, bringing Ablett back in at that age when other guys were sort of going out the other way. What sort of taste does that leave with other people and things like that? So, I know it's a bit of a complicated one. I mean, I think I tend to agree with Ryan that he obviously would probably offer something, and he's quite a unique sort of player. And if you stick him down in a forward pocket or something, he's probably going to create havoc. But then there's all the other stuff, I guess, that surrounds it as well. And it's a kind of topic I think we could probably do a whole podcast on by itself.
Yep. I'd agree with that. No, I also agree. I mean, he could, down a forward, if he was playing as a forward that pinch hit in the middle, he could still probably cause absolute mayhem. But my biggest worry would be the cost to get him in to start with, and would that outweigh? I mean, Gold Coast are building a little bit of a reputation as hard to deal with. He's still under contract. They wouldn't let him just walk out the door. There wouldn't be it wouldn't be like the Sam Mitchell situation with Hawthorn where they just let him go for a pick, late 80s. They'd make him pay. So, but it'll be an interesting 12 months, that's all I'll say, because it'll be interesting to see how loud the jungle drums start beating as the year goes on.
Oh, I guarantee, especially if Gaz misses with injury or anything like that. I mean, the minute he steps foot in Geelong, people are going to be all over him, aren't they? They're going to be wanting to know what his go is.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would think so. And, I mean, Ryan, you'd probably be best placed than anyone, of all of us to sort of talk about it, but I suspect, it's going to get a fair bit of print and online sort of lineage and stuff like that regarding it all next year now that it's sort of come out in the open, and it's not going to be a topic that's going to disappear anytime soon, you wouldn't have thought.
No, this is going to linger all season, I reckon. And certainly heading into trade week, day one of trade week, I think that'll be one of the first questions asked is what Gaz is going to be up to. And I don't know, I reckon I've got a bit of a feeling the Cats might ask the question again. And as we said, it all sort of comes down to cost.
Yep. We'll have a quick look. We'll start to discuss our trade period soon. I just thought we should also mention we've also had the retirements of our two greatest, two of our top three in the games list in Boris Enright and Jimmy Bartel, both hanging up the boots since our last game. I suppose how do you see that impacting the team going forward? Did you think that either of them should have gone on, or what were your expectations? Or did you think they were both done and both finished, Pivo?
Start of the year, I think I may have actually even written on the board somewhere that I expected definitely Enright, I think, to finish up, and suspected Bartel probably would also finish up. But as the season wore on, I must admit I thought Enright probably could have gone around again. And obviously I think the All-Australian selectors probably felt the same way. So, Enright's he's a bit of a freak. I mean, I don't like using the term irreplaceable, but I think he probably almost is irreplaceable. We went after Tui, for a reason, to try and fill a hole, but I mean, how do you fill a guy like Enright? It was a pretty sad day. I think we knew it was coming, but it was still pretty sad to see him go. I mean, I'm glad I saw both of them play their final games. I love Bartel. He was a favourite of mine pretty early on, but yeah, I think he maybe was probably done and probably made a good call. Enright could have eked out another year. I think he probably could have. I would have liked to have seen it.
Ryan, what are your thoughts? And I suppose also, being from the journalist and angle, did you guys have any inkling of what was going to happen one way or another? Obviously earlier than it did as well.
Not particularly. I think I sort of agree with Piv, especially earlier. I definitely thought Enright was going to be his last year, just sort of the way the talk was towards the end of last year and what he sort of said, going through pre-season. And I thought Bartel probably would go around again. But as the season went on, I think that's seriously switched. And Enright was still one of our best players throughout the whole year. And I think probably the best and fairest result sort of backs that up. And I think Jimmy sort of slipped away late. So, the indications I thought we got was that Enright was definitely like 50-50 up until he announced it. Maybe in the back of his head he sort of might have known that he was going to retire, but it certainly wasn't something that was sort of common knowledge. And Jimmy Bartel, I think it's interesting that, I mean, he called time in his career, but I think what sort of his comments sort of in the paper and how it all played out sort of suggests that while he did retire, I dare say he might have been sort of slightly guided out the door. I wouldn't say sort of pushed or anything like that, but I think obviously some discussions between the club and him going forward sort of suggested that he might be best to sort of finish up his career, which was, I guess, a little bit sad to sort of see happen. But like, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts, fellas. Like, from a fan's perspective, how do you think that Bartel situation played out? Were you happy with it? And I guess too, did you think the club handled it well?
I think it was a weird situation in that it was at about mid-year, and Robbo brought it up about how there was all leaks that he wasn't going to be offered a contract, or there was whispers that he was. There was even some stupid rumours that he was dropped because they didn't want him to meet a certain games because it'd trigger a contract and nonsense like that. And then the club came out and said he's got a contract for next year. It's there for him. And then all of a sudden it sort of swung back to make you think he was definitely going on, and then it swung late in the year. There was questions. I think Robbo started it again, questioning if he should be dropped for the prelim, and then my take on it is he was pushed. That's the way I read it. Just his comments about how he thought he had a bit to go on and the club wanted to go in a different direction. He was, I get the impression he was pushed, but I don't know. The whole thing, just the way it was in the media during the year, I found it a bit odd, so I don't really know what. I find it hard to read what was happening with it. I think definitely it's probably the right decision. I think he was starting to struggle, and you prefer to see a bloke go when he's probably got a little bit of time in him, but not much, rather than go that little bit too long and really start to struggle. So I think it's the right decision, but I'm a bit unsure if I was happy with how it all went down. It just all seemed a bit scattered to me. I don't know what your take on that is, Pivo.
Yeah, I'd probably agree with that. Yeah, I mean, it was announced during trade week as well, wasn't it, that he wasn't going on, from memory. So it was almost like, you don't want to sort of buy into the subterfuge and all that sort of stuff, but yeah, it just seemed like an odd time for it to come out, and so you do wonder whether the conversations were along the lines of, you've triggered the clause and you can go on, but there's a good chance you're not going to be playing a lot of senior footy, and I don't think anyone, particularly Geelong people, probably didn't want to see him slumming it, to use a bad term maybe, in the VFL, because of the status we all sort of hold him in, and he's held in by the club. So it probably was the right decision. I agree with a lot of people that I wasn't a massive fan of the way it kind of played out, but ultimately probably the right call. Just, maybe if it could have been done. I mean, I would have loved to have seen both him and Enright sort of announce at the BNF and both sort of get the accolades there. We've read the stories about how people were saying, Bartel sort of wanted to give Enright the time in the spotlight, but I mean, they're both champions of the club. I don't see why then they can't both sort of be held up on the same stage on the same night type thing. Yeah. I would have thought that was quite fitting, but didn't play out that way, unfortunately. And
now, I suppose we get on to our trade period, which, it just looked messy. That's probably the best word I can think of to describe it. It just seemed a bit all over the place. So, I don't really know where to start.
Probably describes last season, I reckon.
Yeah, that's probably true. But it certainly magnified in that 2-week burst or 3-week burst or however long it is these days. Probably the best one to start is the Josh Caddy situation. So, and then the Brett Deledio / Josh Caddy's situation. So we've had a contracted player who had a couple of years of his contract. We'd be basically let go for pick 24 and a bit of a shuffle of picks down the back end. I found it a bit odd the way it all sort of went down so quick when the night before I was listening and I heard Stephen Wells on the radio and he said, they're happy with him. He's happy at Geelong. If we may have the discussions or something along those lines, and then it felt like it was about 10 o'clock the next day that bam, all of a sudden he was traded. So I suppose he's a good place to start. And what was your reaction to that, Ryan, when it all sort of broke and started to happen? And is there more to it that we don't know about, that you may know about?
I reckon it was a weird one because I guess you can't sort of talk about Caddy without sort of talking about Deledio a little bit. And I guess obviously the Cats probably went into trade week and asked a question about Deledio because he sort of was looking for a bit of a move away from Richmond and has his brother plays at Torquay in the BFL. And I'd imagine without sort of knowing 100%, there was probably Motlop was probably thrown up early. Richmond obviously turned that down, and Torque turned to Caddy. And then somewhere in this whole jumble of things where Geelong's sort of talking Deledio and Caddy and Zach Tui's throwing his name around and all that sort of stuff, Richmond's tabled probably what sounds like a pretty good offer to Caddy. I think it was 4 years, correct me if I'm wrong, and probably the option of walking into that Richmond midfield, I would have thought, alongside Dusty Martin and Prestia. And I reckon the offer sort of turned Caddy's head a little bit. I don't think Caddy was keen to leave as such. I think the offer was probably too good to turn down in the end, and that's probably what made him ask to go to Richmond. And I'd imagine Geelong just sort of going on what Wellesley said was Geelong was looking to get back into the draft because they've lost so many picks through last year's trade period, and Richmond offered up pick 24 and a pick swap. It doesn't seem like a lot, and I think Geelong certainly took unders for Caddy. I would have thought that someone with his sort of experience and potential commands would have thought at least a first round pick, but it leaves Geelong in a really tricky situation. Like, I don't know what you guys think, but 24 in my opinion is a sort of midway pick. I mean, it's in the second round, yeah, but there's a lot of good players that are going to be snaffled up before you get there, and I think you look through the history of those sort of picks, and it's pretty hard to get a Josh Caddy, there, I would have thought, or someone at least who can have an impact on the team come round one next year, which is what Josh Caddy would have provided.
Pivo?
Yeah, yes, yeah, I agree with a lot of that. I must admit I haven't paid a lot of attention to the under 18s this year, but there are reports that it runs a little bit deeper than it has in the last couple of years. So that there may be something behind us taking the 24 based on that. So there may be someone that they do have in mind that they figure is going to be around that mid-20s mark. But sort of just looking at the Caddy trade in isolation, I must admit I thought 24 was probably around the mark for him based on sort of his output. I know that he's younger and he's 24 himself, and he's probably got a little bit more upside to go. But I mean, he's approaching the 100 games, and I do wonder whether maybe what we've seen from him now is maybe kind of what you're going to get with him. So based on that, the 24 might not be too bad. Probably the bigger issue I have with it is the fact that he was contracted, and that to me is the key in the whole saga of how this played out. I mean, we're talking about a guy who didn't want to leave by all accounts. Geelong didn't really want to get rid of him. Suddenly, in the last couple of days of the trade period, he gets an offer too good to refuse, and Geelong just say, yeah, all right, we'll take 24 and then we'll give you a better later pick as well and swap it around. If you subscribe to when we have uncontracted players and we kind of let them go. In this instance, Caddy was under contract, so why did we not try and make Richmond cough up a little bit more than perhaps, I think he's worth when he's under contract? It was just a really bit of a strange one that happened.
I think if you look, there might be some greater things sort of at play here as well with Caddy, and I dare say he's on some pretty good money. And Geelong obviously might want to be trying to free up a little bit of cash to help with their options next year with free agency. Who knows, potentially Gaza as well. And then you've also got to look at sort of Caddy's role. I know he was coming back from injury, but he did spend a lot of time forward, and his midfield rotation time tended to drop away a little bit. And then you take into account sort of the guys that are coming up that are potential midfielders next year. And, Scott Selwood we saw later in the year come and play in the midfield. Menegola held his spot down. Josh Cowan can play through there. Guthrie spent a lot of time back towards the end of the year. He can play through midfield. So Caddy, he's one of those sort of second, third string midfield rotations, I think. And given that money, maybe the Cats decided to think, well, maybe we'll free up that cash for a bloke who's probably not going to see a lot of midfield time, and it might help us, in 1, 2, 3 years time.
I can understand and can probably see the merit in a lot of that. My issue was exactly what you said, Piv, was just he's a contracted player, and it just felt like, why would we cop unders for a contracted player? So if he's uncontracted, you sort of don't have as much of a leg to stand on. But if the bloke's got a contract, if Richmond wanted him enough to offer him a 4-year deal, and a decent one by the sounds of it, then surely they would cough up to get him. So it just felt that we let him go cheap when we didn't really have to. And I think that's what's probably caused a lot of frustration with Cats fans out there. We also we saw a few other players who had requested to be traded out move on in Shane Kirsten and Nathan Vardy. It's an interesting... What we received for them is interesting. I think, what was Kirsten, we got a pick in the 60s. We had the problem, though, as far as I could see, we didn't have much leverage, really, because Freo had such a bad year. The threat of letting him walk to the pre-season draft or whatever, they would have had a high pick, I'm guessing, so they would have just happily snapped him up then. And Vardy was fit for the majority of the year and played in the twos all year, so you don't really have a huge amount of leverage if that happens, in my opinion. So I'm worried that losing him, what it does for our depth, but I don't think we really could have made too much demands on to put too many demands on their head, sort of pick wise. I don't know what your take is. What your take is on that, gentlemen? Whoever wants to step in first.
Yeah, with the Kirsten one, I think the other thing we maybe need to keep in mind is that he didn't play a lot in the back part of the year as well. So if we're talking about an uncontracted player who didn't feature greatly in the seniors in the back part, didn't play finals, he wanted out. For us to then turn around to Freo and say, well, we actually want you pick 40, I can sort of imagine Fremantle just looking at them and going, well, all right, let him walk and we'll pick him up, down the track. That said, the writer there is, I've never really been a huge Kirsten fan. He certainly showed improvement this year, but he plays as that third tall, but he's big, but he plays almost more like a medium-sized flanker. He's not going to hold down centre-half forward and things like that. So losing him, not great in terms of the options that we have up there, but I'm not sure it was that big a loss either. That one, again, it's open to debate, I suppose, but there'll be some people that say, no, he definitely was worth 40 and that's what we should have held out for. Others may have just shrugged their shoulders and gone, well, he's uncontracted and considering the way we've been with contracted players in the past, we were going to just get whatever we were offered and just walk away with it.
I think it only comes back to bite Geelong if we lose Tom Hawkins, to a long-term injury. I think you said it best there, mate, when you said, both guys didn't feature. I mean, Vardy was fit pretty much the whole second half of the year, and his form didn't even warrant getting close to the senior team. The only disappointing thing is that we invested so much time into him, and he showed so much talent, but so we've never got to reap the rewards like a Daniel Menzel or a Josh Cowan. Shane Kirsten, I reckon, is an interesting one because he divides opinion of supporters so much. I mean, what did he play? He played 17 games last year and this year and kicked 22 goals. He did play some pretty big roles, I reckon, throughout the year, which probably didn't get the statistical reward which we sort of look at when we analyse games. I was certainly of the opinion he should have played in the prelim final against Sydney. I would have liked to have seen him stay, but as we said, the offer to probably play a lot more regularly at Freo, and the fact that they could have got him for free anyway. If you sort of got to take what you can get and hope that you can find someone else either as a delisted free agent or in the draft to replace him. But I think at times next year we probably might miss Shane Kirsten and sort of what he can bring to the team. And I guess too, he's 22 goals and you lose Caddy's 21 goals. Well, that's 43 goals of walking out of the team as well. They're our fifth and sixth highest goal kicker, I think they were. So, you got to try and find some new avenues, and I think that's going to be a bit of a challenge this year too.
And then we've also had, just before we look at who has come in, we've also had Mitch Clark delisted and Michael Luxford delisted as well, along with pretty much the entire rookie list bar one person in Parsons, I think, from memory.
Yeah.
So, Pivo, for anybody that doesn't know, is a huge James Parsons fan. So we've also... It's probably worth looking, given the fact that we've lost... You mentioned we're in trouble if Hawkins gets hurt. So we've got now Vardy and Kirsten, who are two tall to tallish forward options that have gone. Mitch Clark, who was obviously a tall forward, who's gone. And then we also had big Lucy and Tom Reed who were rookies that were both ruckman size that were gone. So we've had a hell of a lot of height leave us. I suppose, what's your take on the delistings? I'll start with you, Ryan. So then Pivo gets a chance to pump up Parsons. So, well, yeah.
Well, how long have we got? All right. I've got no problems with any of the delistings. I think certainly a lot of the rookie guys. You could have seen that coming. Luxford maybe a little bit unlucky, but he got a sniff of AFL footy and probably didn't come on like the Cats had wanted. Mitch Clark, I don't think will be a massive loss. He's obviously his off-field issues are pretty well noted, and he's done well to sort of become a voice, for mental health and some of the work he's done there. But at the end of the day, he probably didn't play enough football to warrant a new contract. So I don't think we lose too much there. Anyway, with losing Mitch Clark, I think Aaron Black's more than a sort of enough replacement for him as such, in terms of VFL depth, maybe the odd AFL game. But the challenge has to come in the draft now where, as you said, we've lost a lot of height. You just have to think that Stephen Wells has to start looking tall because you look at our list and we've got more than enough smalls. Ruggles is on the rookie list and old mate Parsons there. But, I just think you have to go tall.
Pivo.
We were too tall all year, weren't we?
Yeah,
so
that's right.
We got rid of them. So,
do you have any issues?
Is it a change in tactics, though, do you think? Do you think Geelong will look different next year? The Doggies won the premiership and weren't overly tall up forward. They had a lot more mobile forwards, I sort of thought. Do you think Geelong's playing something a little bit different where they might sort of have, Tomahawk as that one big key with, say, a Reece Stanley maybe rotating through, but then being really mobile up forward. Can you see that happening, guys?
You always tend to imitate the winner of the flag the year previously, so I wouldn't be surprised if that's on the cards. I must admit, I tend to think Taylor may swing forward next year.
Has you may know this, I don't know if it's been announced yet, but has Domsey signed a new deal yet? I'm assuming it's all confirmed that he's going round again. But he has?
Yeah, he'll play next year.
Yeah, which I believe was going to be the case. I just hadn't heard anything about it yet.
I don't know if the club had announced anything, to be perfectly honest, but I would have thought that that announcement, if he was going to retire or pull up stumps, would have been made by now.
Yeah.
And certainly the word sort of from the club there's been nothing sort of coming from the club to suggest that, he was going to pull up stumps this year anyway.
Well, if we're going to quickly mention if it's going to change how we're going to look, we should probably mention who has come in before we get onto that. And obviously, Billy Smets was traded, much probably to the delight of a lot of Geelong supporters, which is probably a little bit harsh on Bill, but he's now a Blue, and we've brought in an Irishman in Zach Tui, and we also, with a pick that I basically equate as a free hit. If you're trading out a pick 90-something, with Aaron Black, I sort of look at that and go, well, if he even gets in the AFL team, that's a good result for the pick you've coughed up for it. So, what's your take on each of those players, Pivo, and will they add anything to the team?
I don't mind Aaron Black. I reckon he. I know his best season was 2 or 3 years ago, but I reckon he can. I reckon he can play a bit. He's had his injury problems, but I think he, for 92. I mean, of course, I'm going to say this. I mean, 92. I mean, what have we really lost, for him? But the only thing that worries me a little bit is I have also seen some North supporters saying that part of what worked against him was the fact that North midfield tended to just bomb it and drop it down on his head. And what do we do with Hawkins? We do exactly the same sort of thing. So if that's a problem for him, then he's probably going to be next to useless for us.
And Tui will obviously add something.
Yeah, look, Tui, of the two names that came up right at the start of the period in Deledio and Tui was the one I was keen on because he fills a need down back. He's got a bit of run. He's got a good hoof on him as well. And he does have a little bit of that mad Irishman about him, which I think probably we could use a little bit of. But yeah, I think just his run is just his run out of the back line and his ability to, carry it and then kick it reasonably long. Yeah, I don't have a problem with it. There's a bit of an issue, I guess, around how we actually did the trade. I'm certainly not a massive rap of trading out of the first round for a third year running. But we do get their second pick, for 2017 coming back the other way. But yeah, the mystifying one in that was, and Ryan, I heard you mention about getting pick 63 and using it. I'd love to use pick 63, except we gave it up in the Tui trade.
Yeah, of course.
Which made no sense at all.
Which made no sense to me whatsoever.
But I didn't see the need for it, but obviously the clubs did.
Did Carlton ship that off as well? Did they go to somewhere else?
No, they've still got it.
Yep.
Right before
who knows what they'll get.
That's all right. Pivo and I had that exact discussion before we started recording because I thought the same thing. I thought they'd shipped it off as well.
Yeah, something told me that I thought they might have been shopping it around.
No, they shipped off the first pick, our first pick though, didn't they?
Yeah, GWS, I think ended up with it.
And so I suppose, right. Ryan, what's your take on the players that have come in?
I reckon I totally agree. Zach Tui it's a great signing. I think he's going to add so much to Geelong next year, not just in 2017, but I think in the future. Geelong's obviously identified they've lost Enright this year. We'll probably lose Mackie the year after. That's a lot of experience going out of your backline, which Tui brings. But also, if you lose Mackie at the end of next year, you're losing a lot of run too. And there's no sort of guarantees that Thurlow's going to return the player that we expect him to be on the back of that knee injury. And then Ruggles and Buse so far have looked to be that more lockdown player rather than creating off half-back type player. So I think there was a definite need to get someone like Tui. The fact that we got someone that has so much sort of class, I think, is a bonus. I reckon he'll come in and have a really good year next year. He'll play a crucial role if the Cats want to sort of hunt towards finals. And I agree with Black as well. I mean, hate to agree with everyone here tonight, but I think that he's sort of been forgotten a little bit, just due to the sheer fact that he didn't play too much at North last year. He only played a handful of games, but his form in the VFL was really good. Definitely warranted senior selection, especially with the way some of North Melbourne's forward line was travelling throughout the year. Just seemed like when he was sort of building up a run of form, he'd get injured or he wouldn't get picked and then he'd get injured the week after. So I think you can sort of write off 2015 when it comes to Aaron Black. And then if you look at his 2 years before that, he was more than serviceable, I would have thought. And I mean, if he has a good pre-season, there's no reason why he couldn't potentially play round one, but I could certainly see him getting a handful of games next year. And as you said, for pick 90, whatever we handed up, it's a free kick, really. If he turns out to be nothing much, well, you haven't really lost much apart from a little bit of wages. And if he becomes a serviceable player, well, it's a good bit of business by the recruiting guys.
And if he becomes the player he was looking like becoming a few years back, then, it's daylight robbery if we've got him for that. So,
well, was it 2013 he had that? It was sensational. He had a really good game against, it might have been the Western Bulldogs or something like that, and he looked like a real player. And I think Fremantle were in the hunt for him. Yeah, might have even been the Saints. I can't remember that game, but he starred. He
had a bit of a breakout year, and he was because he's quite agile from memory, from what I'd seen of him, and he was moving around like a little bloke, but obviously he's a 190 odd centimetre fella, and then weight came in and sort of pushed him back, and then it was sort of him and Ben Brown fighting for that third position, and Brown sort of pushed him out and got the nod, and potentially a bit of that has to do with the fact that Brown had also go into the ruck. So the recruitment of Jared Waite really stalled his career. And then
he's super mobile.
I've got a few North mates, and they sort of said they didn't reckon he's much chop. They reckon he's just a VFL player. But they said if he gets back up and going like he was when he sort of broke out for them, they said it could be a really good pickup. It's just one of those ones where it might work, might not.
Yeah, and I think you've got to remember too that talking doomsday scenarios, Tom Hawkins does a knee or has a hamstring or shoulder and he misses weeks, you've got to have someone that can step up and fill that void. I mean, you can't throw a kid that, hypothetically, if you took with pick 24 straight into that team, you need to have some depth. And I think with Aaron Black, what is that he's got 50 games of AFL experience. He's a mature body. He's not going to be Tom Hawkins. He's not going to kick 5 or 6 goals every week and sort of be that massive presence. But I think you'll get a return from him if you really need to.
I'd love Tom Hawkins to kick 5 or 6 every week.
Yeah, fair point.
But Hawk, and then we did hear Hawk was carrying an injury though, wasn't he? For the back half of the year, from the sounds of it. He's had knee surgery, and I was reading he'll be a late starter to pre-season.
Yeah, he had a little bit of minor surgery once the season sort of finished up. When I asked the club, they didn't sort of know how long he'd been playing with it for. I don't know whether that's them sort of trying to keep it in-house or not, but he looked restricted for a long time. but it's whether that's formulated or just service into the forward line. There's a whole heap of things in play that I think sort of impacted Tom Hawkins a little bit towards the second half of the year.
And I suppose the last one we should look at is we've also signed that young, other than that we've signed a second Irishman as well in the last couple of weeks. So the young fella whose name is it Mark O'Connor, I think? Mick O'Connor?
Yeah, it's not... Yeah.
I've done my research and I haven't... Mark O'Connor. So, does anybody know much about him at all? I know he was obviously... from the sounds of it, he's rated highly as far as like an Irish kid goes.
Internally or externally?
Well, both, either way. But I did hear that Shifter Sheehan was pretty glowingly talking about him. Somebody on Big Footy posted a highlights clip of him playing Gaelic footy, and he looks a natural halfbacker, which seems to be where all the Irish players end up, because they obviously can all run and carry the ball and normally can kick it pretty well and have a bit of toe. But he seems to, from the footage I've seen, he seems quite a nice mark with the round ball at least, in that he takes it fully, like he takes the ball well at its highest point and fully extended, so with his arms fully extended. So there's obviously something there to work with. I don't know if either of you two know much about him. The club itself hasn't really said much since the trade period about any of the players they've picked up. There's been a bit of a highlights clip on the website and app, which features like a dodgy Photoshop job of all the players in a Geelong jumper on the sort of title screen, but not much else. We haven't heard from any of the players yet. We haven't really heard from much, so I don't know if either of you two know much about this particular player at all.
Only that he's a Gaelic footballer. I think he was from Kerry or played for Kerry. But I think the thing that stood out for him was, and I'm happy to be corrected if I'm wrong here because I'm not 100% sure of his background, but I think he's a very good runner. From memory, he might have had might have been like a sub 10-minute 3K time trial or something like that. I'm trying to think back to the story that we had in the paper. But
you're spot on. I think he was definitely sub 10. I think he came fourth in that. So yeah, clearly can run.
That's half the battle these days.
Yep.
In terms of running, so they like it if you can run. Apparently, the recruiters.
It's really just going to come down to how well he picks the game up, the same as any Irish player, and that's obviously. I'm assuming that's why Lucy was delisted. Was so we could get this fella in, because I'm assuming you're allowed to only have one international rookie, or
yeah, I think you can only have one category B.
Because I actually thought Lucy was tracking along not bad. Like he's from where he was last year to how he played this year. It was he'd come along so far in such a short time that I actually would have thought he was worth another year as a rookie just to see how he further developed. But obviously I didn't know if the club didn't see it that way or if they had to move him on to get this other young bloke in.
Without knowing a huge amount of sort of how Lucy was at the end of the season, I remember that VFL final against Essendon, and he was ordinary. And I just wonder whether that was maybe a bit of a nail in the coffin, because when he was in the ruck, he didn't even jump. Yeah. He basically just stood and had, I think, Jamar jumping over the top of him every single bounce. So
the Hamish McIntosh approach to send about to ruck work.
No, that can't be right because McIntosh didn't get on the ground. So
yeah, I think they might have just decided to cut their losses with Lucy. I think he developed enough, but I mean, you've got to really be dominating VFL level, don't you? I mean, I know they're different positions, but we see George Holland-Smith, he absolute star at VFL level, but just, might be that cut below AFL level. So, I mean, for Lucy to come into or try and make it into an AFL team, I think he's still, like, even though he's improved out of sight, he's still probably a long way off, isn't he?
Yep. Don't get me wrong, I didn't think he was going to be a star or anything. I just thought that you'd probably almost persist with him for another year just to see. It's hard because being a ruckman, it's a different game completely, in a different position for him to develop as well, as opposed to the half-back where they can just run at the ball, get it and take off. So...
Look, if nothing else, Lucy's claim to fame is he lasted longer on an AFL list than the original winner of the Recruit did. So
yes, that's true.
There's a story that he can tell his grandkids.
That's right. All right, boys.
It's interesting with the Recruit.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was just going to say, it's interesting to Recruit, talking about recruiting. Like, there's a reason a lot of these guys aren't on AFL lists or in an elite system, and it's because Australia's got such a small talent pool that it's pretty easy to get picked up. You know, not many guys sort of fly under the radar. So I'd be surprised if any of these sort of guys go on to forge sort of long AFL careers for that reason. I think it's sort of further proof when Lucy makes it 2 years. The bloke who won it, who was meant to be the best of that, gets delisted after one.
Yep.
Sort of probably says where the talent pool is outside of that elite system, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
Boys, I've gone overtime what I planned to, as per normal. So that might just about wrap us up, I think. Thank you both for being on. Pivo again.
No problems, mate. Hey, are you going to do a Christmas special?
We might.
Or...
There might be something in the works. There's a whisper that Daz Broncos might be in town, so rather than him getting up at 3 a.m. to try and do a podcast, I might try and just make one up just so he can do one in normal time.
I reckon, and you should do it when everyone's drunk as well.
We might do that as well. That sounds like a good idea. What could possibly go wrong?
What indeed.
Thank you very much for joining us, Ryan.
No, I loved being on, fellas. Thanks for having me on. As I said, any time. Happy to talk Catters any day.
And Ryan also let a bit of mail out that he knows people that listen to the show, which means that people actually have listened to this podcast. So that was a bit exciting.
I can guarantee you're going to get at least 3 listeners every week from the guys I talk to. So,
all right.
But do they listen to it and then make fun of us, or do they go, yeah, no, they actually know what they're talking about? It's don't answer it. I don't think I want to know what the actual answer is.
I was just going to say no comment.
Hey, I'll have you know that this podcast has been referred to by at least one person as better than the club one. So that's on record. That's it. A couple of people, actually. I reckon it goes all right. So room for improvement.
Drunken Christmas special might go through the roof then.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. We'll try. And I can tell people I am trying to work on getting a very special guest on who certain people at the club have told me they think would be a great idea, but I'm just trying to actually get in touch with people to get it all happening. So watch this space. Hopefully over the pre-season would be nice if we could try and get it to happen by the end of the year, but I don't want to give away what I'm trying to get happening. So watch this space. That's all I'll say. Otherwise, thanks very much, guys, for being part of it all, and we'll be back when something exciting happens next and we can do another show. Cheers.
Cheers.